Hello everybody and welcome back to another Marvel Crisis Protocol Character Spotlight. And for this week's Character Spotlight, we are taking a look at actually a fairly recent release in the form of Yondu. And yeah, I really like Yondu, so I'm excited to kind of talk about him and explore him a little bit more. Being a newer character, I don't have as much experience with him as some of the other characters in this series, but I still think I've gotten enough reps in with him that I kind of understand how he works, and I just really like the character. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into things here. Starting out with his basic stat line here, he's got a 3-4-3, so a little bit of a preference for energy. He's 6 stamina, as a 4 threat, is a size 2, and a medium mover, so nothing too crazy there so far. Then we move into his attacks, which is where he starts to get a little bit more interesting, starting with his Yaka Arrow. This is going to be a range 5 dice energy attack, so very long range. After the attack is resolved, you can gain power based on the damage dealt, sure thing, and the target character does not benefit from cover. So yeah, this is really big. Range 5 attacks generally, a lot of the times you can't really, get around things like cover as easily, especially if you're playing on some of those scenarios like Scoundrels or something like that, that's giving everyone cover, or playing against, say, like a Magneto or something like that. So yeah, being able to ignore cover is fantastic. And then of course you have the Wild Slow here as well, throwing out the slow condition. And immediately for this attack alone, I've already kind of mentioned this, but I have a huge preference towards playing Yondu on Scoundrels. I think almost any list that I include Yondu in is running it, because he's just really good just because of this attack. I mean, he has other things that matter as well, but being able to say, okay, you're slowed, so crossing between points is now a problem for you, and also I'm ignoring the defensive tech that this scenario is giving everybody else on the board, and yeah, it just feels really good. So, huge preference for him in that scenario right out the gate. Then we move on to a Spender, which is also pretty cool. It's a whistle while you work. This is a 3 cost, range 4, so a little bit closer range. 6 dice energy attack, so only 1 die more, but it has this wild pierce here, which is nice. You're going to be able to get a little bit of extra consistency through that. Unfortunately, this one doesn't ignore cover, which is something you got to remember. I definitely have slipped that up a few times. But he has this wild hit Yaka Mastery here. After this attack is resolved, this character may make a whistle while you work attack without paying the power cost. This attack must target another character within range 3 of the original target character in any distance from this character that has not been targeted by a whistle while you work attack this round. This is really cool. That's a relatively easy trigger to get on, 6 dice not being the most, but still not that bad of a trigger, and there are tons of things that can kind of improve that. And yeah, you can pretty consistently, especially if you're playing him in like his home affiliation, you can pretty consistently hit this trigger at least once or twice if you're trying to, and hit 2 or 3 characters with this in a turn relatively consistently. The one downside is the way that it is worded. If you're trying to double tap with the Spender, you won't be able to bounce it into anyone you've already bounced it into, or you've made a primary target of the attack previously in the same round. So this is really a Spender you only kind of want to pop once per round, unless you like don't get the trigger, so now you're just going to go for a different target with it, or the same target, and hope you get the trigger. It's not the best for kind of being able to double or triple tap, is kind of what I'm saying here. It's more meant for just kind of being able to be like, okay, you've got like 3 or 4 guys on low health, let's see if we can take out multiple of them in one attack, which is definitely nice. So yeah, it's a really solid Spender. It only costs 3, so it's not too expensive to try, and yeah, I mean, it hits reasonably hard. He's definitely not going to be taking down like Hulks or anything like that with this, but really good at just kind of fighting a bunch of kind of squishier characters at once. Moving on from his attacks, he has his hit and run here. If the opposing team starts to get a little bit too close to him, he can use this to get away, or he can use this to advance up the board while still attacking things with that nice range 5 that he has. So this is just your standard hit and run here. It's going to cost him 2, he's going to make an attack, and then he's going to move. After that, we have the Ravager Code, Steal Everything. This is one of his really fun, unique superpowers that he has. This is a reactive. It's going to cost him 1. That says when a character within range 2 of this character would drop 1 or more objective tokens, this character may use this superpower. Move 1 objective token the chosen character is holding to this character. This character is now holding that token. He may not hold more tokens than the crisis specifies using this rule. So yeah, this is really cool. If your allied models are holding objectives and say they either drop them, like they daze them, or maybe your opponent tries to use an objective drop or something like that on them, Yondu can just kind of be like, nope, that's mine. And not let your opponent place down the token, which is really nice. This also works for enemy models. Say you have a model trying to take down an opponent's model that already has an objective, and Yondu already, or the model you're using already has an objective, but Yondu doesn't, Yondu can use this to just plink the objective right out of their inventory after they drop, instead of, having to drop it on the ground and then wait a turn to go with Yondu. So we can kind of pick up objectives out of activation with this, which is definitely a nice little bit of utility that people don't always see coming. So yeah, really, really nice thing that he can do there. Works fantastic for if you're kind of on like a gunline style scenario, any sort of like infinity formula or some of the new kind of like square shaped objective maps where you can kind of just be like, yeah, I'm going to put like 2 or 3 guys with guns on this point, and if any of them drop, Yondu is just going to yank the objective. So I guess you have to target Yondu first now. Have fun with that. And yeah, I think it works kind of well. It makes for a little interesting lineup there. It works really well in kind of a gunline style list. Next, he has Quick Draw, which is his main piece of defensive tech here. This is a 2 cost when this character is targeted by an attack and the attacker is not within range 2 of this character. The character may use this superpower. Instead of rolling dice equal to its defense, he rolls 5 defense dice, and then if he takes no damage from the attack, after the attack is resolved, the attacker suffers 2. This stacks really, really nicely with cover. As we were previously mentioning, I really like this model on Scoundrels. As far as defensive attack goes, it's not the greatest thing in the world. I mean, rolling 5 dice is fine, but it's nothing insane. Being able to deal the damage back, though, and being able to threaten that is certainly very nice. And if you're running him in his home affiliation, or, just taking advantage of something like cover or the other superpower he has, you can definitely boost the odds on those 5 dice and make it kind of scary for your opponent to try and punch him. So that's definitely a nice thing. Speaking of his last superpower here, we have the Pirate Way. While this character is holding 1 or more objective tokens or contesting a secure objective token, it may reroll 1 die in his attack and defense rolls. This is definitely pretty big for him. He loves sitting on a back point, and I mean, he loves holding onto objectives, especially with the Ravager code, to just kind of be like, yoink, I'm going to grab that from my ally. So yeah, I mean, he already wants to be playing the objective game for the most part anyways, so while he's doing that, he's going to have rerolls, and making that 5 dice with a reroll, or even 3-4-3 with a reroll, and then making his other attacks here, the trigger for Yaka Mastery gets a little bit better, 6 dice with a reroll, and then your basic attack here just being 5 dice with a reroll, ignoring cover. It can be pretty brutal. So yeah, he definitely hits reasonably hard, even though the actual dice pools are somewhat smaller. He's going to fairly consistently have rerolls unless your opponent's been putting him out of position and things like that, which even then he's got hit and run to kind of try and get back into position for his second attack. So yeah, he's definitely got the tools to take advantage of this, and turns out rerolls are good, especially when you have them on most things. Before we move on to cards, we're also going to flip him over real quick and notice that he does go down to 5 stamina on the flip side. He definitely feels a little squishy on his flip side, so something to kind of keep in mind is once he flips over, he's not going to last as long as he did on the front. And because he does kind of plant a target on his back with the Ravager code, you definitely have to kind of have a plan to how you're going to keep him safe, whether that's just murder everything coming at him first, or, have other models that can kind of help keep him in the fight. That's kind of up to you, but yeah, just something to kind of keep in mind is once he flips, I've had at least a few times now where he is not long for the world anymore, so definitely something to consider. As far as cards go, he only has 1 tactics card, although I do think it's a pretty good one. It's Plundered Goods. This is an unaffiliated card, so even if you're splashing him, you can bring this along. And he can spend 2 power to play this card. It's an active card, doesn't have to be his turn or anything like that. This round, when an allied character attacks an enemy character within range 3 of Yondu, if the enemy character is holding 1 or more objective tokens, the allied character may reroll up to 2 dice in its attack roll. Do note that this is an allied character, it doesn't say another allied character, so this will work for Yondu. If he's within 3 of his target and they're holding objectives, he gets 2 rerolls on top of the reroll he already had. This is really, really good when you start going for a whistle while you work and you want to chain into a bunch of different models. Being able to now reroll 3 dice against all of them feels really, really good. So yeah, fantastic. Already off to a great start. But wait, there's more. Additionally, when an allied Yondu attacks an enemy character contesting or holding 1 or more objective tokens this round, which, as we've established, he's already trying to do, after the attack is resolved, he's going to gain 1 power. So he's also going to gain the power back from using this card, especially if he is getting those triggers on his spender, hitting multiple targets in a single attack. He's going to be getting the power back pretty quickly. There's one kind of downside to this card is that Yondu doesn't have anything that works at range 3. He wants to work at range 4 or 5 most of the time, so he does need to come in a little bit closer than he wants to play this card. I find this usually works kind of as like a crackback turn where your opponents come in, they've dazed some of your models, maybe they've dazed Yondu, he's woken up, he's surrounded, and now he needs to pop this card and just go off. that's kind of when I find this card the most valuable, because, you know, your opponent has moved in and they put themselves in range 3 of you, because Yondu doesn't ideally want to move into that range himself. But it is also worth mentioning that he is giving allied characters those rerolls as well, and Yondu doesn't actually have to be not wounded to give that benefit to your allies. So if Yondu uses a hit and run, plays this card, gets into a bad position, but has range 3 on a bunch of enemy models, it doesn't actually matter if Yondu goes down, because the rest of your team is still going to benefit from those rerolls for the rest of the round. So you can definitely take advantage of that and do some kind of interesting things with this card, as long as, you know, your opponent doesn't have too many options to move their models out of the way. As far as affiliations are concerned, he's only a member of one affiliation, although it's certainly a good one for him, that being Guardians of the Galaxy, where he has Star-Lord as a leader who can hand out some Wing It tokens, which gives you some rerolls on basically whatever you need them for. And yeah, this is definitely great for him. You can use this to try and get that trigger for his whistle while you work. You can use this for a little bit more defensive consistency, especially if you're going for the quick draw ability there. And he also just kind of plays to the Guardians playstyle pretty well. I mean, he's a gunline piece. He's going to be able to sit back with models like Star-Lord, Rocket, Agent Venom. They're all going to be able to kind of just sit on back points and pew pew away all day long. So yeah, I mean, he's right at home in Guardians. As far as splashing Yondu, I think there's kind of two main things he's looking for. The first one being anywhere where you're kind of running a gunline style list. If you can run a good gunline, Yondu is definitely a piece worth considering, especially if you're worried about showing up on something like Scoundrels. Between Yondu and Agent Venom, if you can squeeze both of them into your list, maybe one of them's affiliated, then they work really, really effectively at being like, oh, you thought this was going to save you from a gunline? Same if you're going into like Magneto Brotherhood or something like that. Think again, these two models are going to not care at all. So yeah, really, really effective model for gunline style lists. One of the first places I think of, I haven't tried them there myself yet, is something like Shield, where you also have access to Agent Venom, and you know, you can kind of stack more rerolls with something like Invincible Iron Man. You can do defensive rerolls with Namor, or just unlock your skulls if you're maybe playing your card and you're going to have a bunch of rerolls for a round. Being able to unlock your skulls could certainly be nice. So yeah, I mean, he's got some cool options here. I think he plays reasonably well to the kind of traditional gunline shield playstyle, although of course with invaders they kind of move around a little bit more, so that's slightly different. But yeah, I think he works pretty well for something like that. Anywhere you're kind of trying to do that sort of game plan, he's going to fit in all right. The other thing is just kind of if you are playing Scoundrels, I think he's a worthy inclusion. I think he's probably one of the better models in the game for that scenario, right up there with someone like Agent Venom, but without the drawback of only 2 energy defense that Agent Venom has. So yeah, he works pretty effectively for that sort of list if you're planning on running that scenario, because maybe you play against a lot of gun lines in your local meta or something, you want a way of kind of fighting back. He can definitely help you do that. And, you know, obviously, it's kind of fighting fire with fire, because he's definitely a gunline piece himself. The other thing he's going to be looking for out of leadership is rerolls, specifically rerolls that he, you know, doesn't have to be close to the enemy for. So not something like Defenders too often is not going to be his favorite thing. But something like, you know, Black Panther, Wakanda, we already mentioned Invincible, Iron Man, Shield, both going to be good for him. I think I definitely lean towards offensive rerolls for him over defensive rerolls, because he wants to be able to use it to get his triggers and things like that. So that's probably kind of the direction I would go. So, you know, less so something like a Web Warriors, although he does hand out slow, so he could potentially be interesting there. I haven't really put too much thought into it yet. But, you know, just a few kind of options like that could be interesting for him. He's not generally too power starved from what I find, having 5 dice range 5 builders, so he can double tap most turns with a single reroll on them, is pretty consistent at building power, so he's not usually too worried about having extra power, so you don't need to worry about that too much for him. If you want to go for extra consistency, you could also play around with something like a Steve 3, or one of the leaders who lets you use your wilds to create extra hits. That can help you get that trigger as well, so you have a few options with stuff like that. But yeah, he's kind of a very generic piece. He's going to fill a very specific role, and if you kind of need that role filled, then he's definitely a great piece to consider. If not, then you don't really need him. And I think it's going to kind of come down to a case-by-case basis on whether he is the inclusion. But yeah, it's definitely a bit of a meta call. I think if you're playing into a lot of Scoundrels or Brotherhood and you're worried about that, he's going to be great. If you're trying to play a gunline style list, he's going to be great. Outside of that, I mean, he's a very consistent model. Like in Guardians, I will run him even if I'm not running a particularly gunline style list. Like if I'm running more of the melee ones, you know, like your Gamoras, your Beta Rays, those sorts. I'll still definitely consider Yondu in that roster because he's still a very kind of just efficient piece. The one thing you do have to watch out for, as we mentioned, is he paints a massive target on his back, and he is definitely on the squishier side. So things to consider. But yeah, I think that basically sums up my thoughts on Yondu here. Definitely let me know what you guys think down below. Are there places where you guys really enjoy splashing and leaderships and things like that that I just haven't thought of for him yet? Very, very curious to hear what you guys think, because I've been really enjoying playing this model, so I'm definitely looking forward to excuses to put him in some different homes, because, yeah, I don't know, I just think he's a lot of fun. He's a very, very straightforward model. I mean, the Ravager Code Steal, everything is a very unique superpower, but everything else on his card, for the most part, we've seen before, but he's just really fun. He shoots things real good and sits back and goes pew-pew. It's great. But yeah, so I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you did, please do drop a like down below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. We do discussion-focused content like this throughout the week, and we got battle reports on the weekends. So if you're a fan of any of that sort of thing, feel free to jump on in. But that's going to do it for this one. So until next time, have a great day, everybody. Peace.